Hey YouTube Gundam here, welcome back to Space Engineers. So, a couple days ago, I returned from Chicago where I met Timothy Zahn, and I asked him a question. If Grand Admiral Thrawn had built a ship, or designed a ship, what would it be? But he said, basically, because he and I, after I asked the question that's in the video that I uploaded, he then, Timothy Zahn said that I talked for something like an hour, and basically, as we talked about all sorts of different ships, he kind of said that he would make something similar to Resurgence but much smaller. He says an Imperial might be the maximum size, but if he could make ships of his own, it might be different. He'd probably, if he had the luxury of designing his own, Thrawn then would do so, but probably would just take existing and modify them. In the Empire trilogy, Thrawn really didn't have the time to modify existing ships. So if he did take it, then what would he do? So I decided to work on something. So this is what I've come up with for a modified Imperial class Star Destroyer. The good old Imp Star Deuce. So one of the first things that he says, there's supposed to be an art gallery. I can imagine there's an art gallery in there. And then he said, there should be a lot of fighters. And the bridge should be brought down. But he didn't really say anything else per se until after we started talking about stuff. I did mention a couple YouTubers like the Maya Jingles, Generation Tech, and Eckhart Slatter. I really need to show up Eckhart Slatter's video, but nah. He had a 7-second video on how to fix the Imperial Star Destroyer. Basically, is cut off the head and then take the top and copy and paste it to the bottom. So you'd have the superstructure down below per se, but also mainly guns. This is a little bit different. So let's go over what I've done. There are some major changes. Here's the first one to notice. Well, first off, let's start with this, actually. Do you remember in Rogue One, there were 3 triple guns here? Now, I don't have triple guns in my mods, so I have to use dual guns. My apologies. But in Rogue One, there are these 3 guns. Now, they were very tiny in comparison to the main batteries, but I would imagine they are much too big to be point defense cannons. Like the Millennium Falcon's quad rails, the Ghost has those dual heavies, and Venator had dual heavies in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, it was seen. But yeah, the Millennium Falcon's quad rails, those are way too small, and these guns way too big. So, like in World of Warships, ships have the main battery, the secondary battery, and then the anti-aircraft battery. The main battery for a battleship is the really big guns. Then there's the secondary battery, which is significantly smaller for a battleship, but it would be the primary armament on things like a corvette or a frigate or a destroyer even, depending on the size. Now, an Imperial Star Destroyer is more like a heavy cruiser, not really a battleship. For the Empire, I mean, the fact that you take a look at the Bellator is like 7 kilometers long, and that's one of their smallest dreadnoughts. But Imperial is only 1,600 meters. Yeah, a battleship would be somewhere in between, about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 kilometers would be their battleships. So, still on a heavy cruiser, though, those triple guns do look like secondary guns. Maybe they're triple laser cannons or triple heavy laser cannons. Probably just laser cannons, but they would be secondary guns. Like, they're designed for anti-capital or anti-ships such as the Ghost, but would be overkill if they were placed on something smaller. Or could be seen as, because the Ghost's weapons are all to kill fighters, but if it were to have a couple of big guns, it would effectively be the same as what those triple guns were shown as in Rogue One. So, secondary guns. I decided to promenade them a little bit more across the ship, because I think that is something Thrawn would do. Because one of the things that the Rebels did, and others, is have small, fast sub-capitals that were bigger. Well, like the Millennium Falcon, and just small, fast capital ships like the CR-90. Enormous turbolasers would move a little bit slower, and thus you would want a gun that can turn a bit faster, even if it does less damage per shot. There's more of them, and they can have a higher rate of fire. And against something small and fast like a CR-90 Corellian Corvette, a few shots is all you need. Now, this does not show the vast majority of weapons. It's just a few weapons here and there. So let's go over the changes. First off, you will see these guns all over the place, and they're basically just the same thing as what's in Rogue One. I think it's a secondary gun, not an anti-fighter, but some sort of an anti-small capital or anti-large subcapital, something like that. So not really a small interceptor or something. Even the Y-Wing might be a little too small for it to target, but the ARC 170 might work. So you'll see these dotting all over the ship. But yes, the first major change here, where there's that enormous slot. I actually left the beginning of the slot, but the end of the slot I had to cut back. It was around about here, I believe. I can't remember. Was the end of that big slot. So this is what I've done with it, is put in hangars. A relatively small hangar for fighter craft, and a larger hangar for shuttles and gunships and other auxiliary craft. And obviously it's on the other side as well. But there's, well, the two of them, and it's directly over the other two. So, and I believe it should go all the way back and connect, and even connect with the others underneath, and have some sort of a larger hangar, because I think Thrawn would add a heavy automation. I also think he would add an enormous amount of point defense. I think maybe he would stick some turbolasers here and here, and obviously in the trench there'd be several. But yeah, adding in this hangar to launch, instead of launching all your fighters from just that one underneath, launching them from 3 areas would be a much better option, and you could store far more fighters doing this. So the next thing was, on this little bit that was here, I didn't have a model in Space Engineers, my apologies, but do you remember in Empire Strikes Back there was that big ion cannon on Hoth? I think Thrawn was something like that here, so that's what that's supposed to represent. Some big heavy ion cannon. Now, so that change, that little change, again those other guns there. The next major change is the bridge, which this, in case you're wondering, is actually just what I stuck on to show. This is the bridge window in that section. Basically, it's cut off the neck, get rid of the neck, drop that large structure down, and then just flush it out to the bottom, and then take this, which is supposed to end about there, and flush it out, bulge it out. But drop it all down, so in reality, it should look like this. Goodbye. This is what it should look like, instead of all the way up there for that thing. What Timothy Zahn said is, what I agree with, is drop it down. It's still a little exposed, but it's much, much closer to the main hull. So, another change there. Now, another is, he said that the ship shouldn't really be any bigger than Imperial. I left the bottom, but I added this small rear wing. Because what you can do with the rear wing, and yes, I did push this out as well, there's your trash compactor. What you can do with this is help defend the engines, because Thrawn would know you need to defend your engines. So, if you have some secondary guns to help guard the engines, not really on the top because the rest can cover the top, but some secondary guns, a lot of point defense, maybe a couple of small turbolasers, and then these, yes, 4 main battery cannons here. It may seem like a little much, but think of it. This area has basically nothing. And especially for down here, what can hit you? I've decided to stick some guns here, but noticing this, there's a gun there, there's that gun there. So if you're inside it, if you're right about here, or even up, they won't be able to hit the engine and could still hit you with what few guns are there. Or if you're back here, then just those 4 guns there, those 2 guns, and then those two big main guns, and that little one on the side there. That's the thing. Adding in those main batteries could actually help defend the incredibly weak backside. Again, it is slightly longer, but not quite. The next thing I did was add in this large pod, which is actually, I started with putting in another auxiliary engine, just like the others over there, just to give a little more thrust, because there is a little added weight. Then I put in these three large beams, one on the top, one on the bottom, and one on the side. And then I flushed it out, but I don't think this should be solid. He would put in a rib structure and then have it just be spaced armor. It would keep the weight down, yet it would make it that you can't actually, from the side or the top, shoot straight at the engine. And even from the back, even if you're up there, that's a pretty tiny shot. And that's a very small shot trying to get to the engine. Although a little exposed, if you're trying to hit that, you are incredibly exposed, and it's not a very big target. So, it adds some thrust, it's protected, and it adds some structure, while giving positions for more guns. I believe there would be point defense weapons there and there. And along with, well, there would be PDCs across the entire ship. Instead of 50, I think there'd be 100 or more, as Thrawn would know it's a major threat. Now, the next thing I did was add in some structure down below. And this is actually the last change. So there's the hangar, dropping on the bridge, adding that rear wing, adding the auxiliary engine, and then this. Yeah. First off, a couple of those big guns there. Oh, and that is a CR-90. If it were touching the rear, and the double bit there at the front is actually the cockpit, the size it should be. The engine should be a little bit bigger, but that's actually to scale and pretty much an entire CR-90, or just about. So, what is here? Well, along with those guns and those guns, which are directly below, that's two of them. The other one should be right there, it's not. Some more guns there. There's those there, and yeah, that. Thrawn is no fool. He would know that the bottom is an incredible weakness. Adding in a few turbolasers here and there, but throw in some main batteries on the bottom of the ship. So you get underneath it, there's a hangar, and then you die. Now, another thing I did was actually take the reactor, which was supposed to stick out where you can see the slightly colored blocks there and far lower, and pull it inside. So though it is still slightly exposed, is a much smaller target now. Yes, along with adding just a small amount of superstructure, just for some added stuff here and there. Not much, just a few things here, a few things there, just puff it out a little bit. I imagine there would be some missiles and some small guns here and there around, but yeah. So the 6 major changes, because you can see the reactor, that tiny bit right there, that different color. The 6 major changes: the hangar, drop that down, the rear wing, the engines, pull up the reactor, and then add this large superstructure bit to the bottom. It's that whole thing from there all the way back, and includes those big guns. And it is basically the same as on top. It's in the exact position, just underneath, and it's not quite the whole thing. Now, this is just a beginning of what I believe Thrawn would do to the Imperial Star Destroyer. But I do believe this is what, and in case you're wondering, that sound is me taking screenshots. I do believe this is what Thrawn would probably do as a start, and then just add in more PDCs, point defense cannons, and a bunch of other stuff like that. He would just add in some real goodies here and there. And yeah, he would, that's a good view of the top. You can see, yeah. But from the front, of course, is important. That's some other stuff I'm working on, some Golons and some stuff for Halo. Oh, that's a good shot, actually. Yeah, I just wanted to take a few pictures. But you can see where it kind of resembles a Venator, and yet has some good engines, and yet from the front, look at that. You can see the engines bulging, and you can see the bridge, yes, and you can even see, if you look at the bottom, you can even see the bulge of those gun ports. Though they're not that big, and the bridge is a tiny target compared to what it used to be. The lighting in this game does not permit everything to be quite so good. So I'm going to say this, because people are going to ask. I'm going to upload this to the Steam Workshop. Anyone that wishes to take a look at this may take a look at this. Anyone that wishes to download it and make changes, please do so. I only ask that you give me credit for the original. I'm going to take my video and upload this and send it to Timothy Zahn's Facebook. He probably isn't going to notice, but you never know. This is just my base concept of the overall outline design. And just as for additional stats, there would be basically take the Imperial 2, which is a lot of turbolasers. I would keep pretty much all of them, obviously adding a lot more big ones. Put in heavy automation throughout the ship, some additional secondary reactors, and a lot more secondary guns, and those big ion cannons, and just, the Imperial 1 had 50-point defense turrets, or no, excuse me, the Venator had 50, the Imperial 1 had 60, despite being way bigger. I think Thrawn would have a minimum of 120, and a mixture, the dual heavies and quad rails. So the long range heavy hitting but slow to turn, and the fast firing light hitting but quick to turn. So there's anti-bomber and anti-interceptor, and at least 120 of them, if not more. Along with several missiles and a bunch of other stuff. I think this would have missiles, but in the superstructure, top, bottom, places like that. Yeah, and in case you were wondering, there are no shield bulges. Where there's big shield bulges, besides dropping this down, Thrawn would look and say, okay, putting a big shield bulge here, putting a shield bulge there, stupid. Stick them inside, have one over there, one over on the other side, one over there, another there, maybe even another up there. So 8 to 10 instead of just those two, and by having multiple in the back but still some in the front and overlapping, keep them strong. And yes, with automation, I think this is possible. Reduce the crew quantity and get rid of some of those walkers. You don't really need ATs. Old ATEs from the Clone Wars are actually better and a fraction of the size. But even getting rid of those would be a good idea. Made an actual capital ship with just light infantry and light tanks, basically. But yes, by sticking in the shield generators and adding in way more, they're protected, they're overlapping, and there's far more of them. Adding in the auxiliary engines like this would make it, I believe, a little bit faster, especially if there's a new reactor somewhere in there. Far more fighters, far more PDC. Again, I think 120 PDCs or more. And just, yeah, I'm still thinking on the rough stats, but I think it would just be significantly better over the place. And, yeah. But it's just the overall layout is what I was going for here. Anyone wants this, go ahead and take it. Go ahead and make what modifications you think Thrawn would do if he were to overhaul his own Imperial class. But keep the general Imperial. I mean, you can see this. It looks like an Imperial. Definitely. It's just, that's dropped down. Those are added. That's been cut out. The reactor's been pulled up, and that's been added. It's the lighting from the game. I'm sorry. I just don't know how to fix that. Sorry. Yeah. So, yeah. I think there will be far more fighters, maybe even 200 fighters in here instead of 72, and they can deploy from 3 hangars. So, yeah. But yeah, I think this would be Thrawn's Imperial, or at least a base. Again, anyone can use this, anyone can talk about this, anyone can show it in a video, take a picture. I don't really care. I just want you to give me credit. And obviously give Timothy Zahn credit for Thrawn and other stuff. But yes, please just, just give me credit for this modification. Alright? Thank you. Bye-bye.